Yo, the world's best UI library just released their first RC for version 1. And bro, when I talk about the best UI library, I don't mean shadcn, because shadcn is actually not a UI library. No, we talk about base UI, because that's the future. From the creators of Radix, Material UI and Floating UI, base UI is an unstyled React component library for building accessible user interfaces. Our focus is on accessibility, performance, developer experience, and the goal is to provide a complete set of open source UI components with a delightful developer experience in a sustainable way. Okay, so many things to dive into here, from why this is important, what actually means headless, and why shadcn can play an important role here. But base UI is not paying me for that video. That's why we hear a quick word of today's sponsor. You are watching this video. This probably means you are a React developer and interested in UI. So I got something awesome for you. Tambo AI. With this little juggling squid, you can bring generative AI into your application live. So not like V0 where it's not really connected to your app. No, Tambo AI is on a whole different level. It is connected to your components, understands them, and even displays them, as you can see right here. So it's building charts dynamically on the fly. The starter plan is free and growth just costs $25 a month. Check them out at dub.sh/TamboAI. Thanks to Tambo AI for sponsoring this video. So this UI library here, which actually is an UI library, is headless, accessible, composable. They have a great team working on it with great experience, and they have great browser support. But why is nobody using base UI? Do you have any idea? It's because of shadcn. Because shadcn uses Radix UI under the hood. Radix is also a UI library. Shadcn is not, because shadcn just uses UI libraries to build, a style system. But if we look into the components of shadcn, like the calendar, this is for example using React Day Picker. If we look into the chart component, for example, it is using, I think, recharts. Built using recharts. But many of the components you will find in here, like the often used dialog, are actually by Radix UI. And there's one big problem with Radix UI. It is not maintained anymore. Not really, but it's badly maintained. That's why a lot of people are actually switching from Radix to base UI. So we can see that right here in the contributors panel, where we can see that in the last month, especially here between July and August or October, nothing really happened, and many developers like Benoit Grillard are not committing anymore. Overall, development is somehow freezing. Like if we compare this graph to base UI, you will see what I mean. This is actually active development here. But why is shadcn still using Radix UI? The answer to that question is pretty simple, because base UI was always in beta, and using something that is in beta doesn't feel right, because APIs might change quite often and it could lead to a pain. But now this has changed, because base UI officially released V1 release candidate. Nice. And I tell you what, folks, if you have already a design system, a style system, and you don't want to use shadcn, that's totally fine. You can now use base UI. There are not many changes coming anymore, and the stable version is not far away. But enough of that. Let's dive into what's new and how to set it up. Setup is pretty simple here. You just install base UI components React. There we go. This just installs this package here. We see the current version. And next step is pretty interesting. We have to set up the portals. In Radix UI and shadcn, portals are working already somehow inside, but somehow they are sometimes buggy. Here you have to define them on your own. You have to wrap your whole application with a div with a class name root. But interesting is what you have to set on this root element, and this is the isolation isolate, which creates a separate stacking context for your application so that pop-ups always appear above the page contents. Nice. Let's just do that. Open your layout tsx. You have your body here, and then you can rip it in another div, put the children inside, and give it a class name. I think most of you guys are working with Tailwind, so you can just use the class isolate. But that's not it. And that's what I really like about base UI, where you feel that this is actively maintained. They have something about iOS 26 and Safari to say here, because there's an interesting bug. I found a tweet of Devon Govert here who shows that, where you can see that on the bottom bar, there's this weird visual lag and bug going on with dialogues, which is just not pretty for your web apps. So to also fix that, you can define position relative on your body, but I'm not sure if that's a great idea, because a relative element high in the tree, I already had some experiences with that, but if you're running into this issue, this might be a great fix. And that's it. Now you choose any component you would like the combo box in here, and you can decide if you want to use CSS modules, Tailwind CSS, copy the code, like the normal shadcn UI library flow, where you copy the component, paste it into your application, and it basically just works out of the box. With base UI, you always get a lot of information about the things. So if you really want to go into detail, then you have a lot of documentation here inside with all possible use cases and all the functions, all the settings that these components serve you. It's awesome, but might look overwhelming the first time. So base UI has a lot of components. There are many. Usually you know all of them because they are pretty basic, right? But base UI has one or two components I really like, which is, for example, the autocomplete, because Radix doesn't have it. And when Radix doesn't have it, usually shadcn hasn't also. And the autocomplete component is pretty cool. It's like, yeah, basically just like autocomplete. Yeah, I really just like this implementation, and I think a lot of apps can profit from a autocomplete component. But when you compare these components to shadcn, you might think, like, if I open this one or if I see a button, doesn't look as pretty as it looks with shadcn, right? Yes, because shadcn puts a styling on top. But this UI library here is what a UI library really is. It is headless. There's no head, and the head means here the styling. So this UI library comes without any styles. So what you need to do is you have to define your styles on your own. So you directly put these styles on top here, and that's how you can build these awesome components. But I think that shadcn will opt into base UI actually, but maybe that will take some time. And they have more guides. They have guides about animation. They have guides about the principle of composition and how this library is using it, how you customize the things, how you style these things, different styling solutions. A lot in here. I think this UI library is the future because it's actively maintained by people with a great career. And yeah, if you want to understand why shadcn is not a UI library, watch this video here. Thank you for watching and have a great day. Bye bye.